you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Report.
Hear ye, come on. You are listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Joel Nikoloff and Darnell Samuels.
I know you hate me for saying this, bro, but again, just feeling blessed, man. Just feeling blessed.
Why are you feeling blessed?
Well, guests that are willing to come on our show, and more importantly, guests that I think have some good insights that our audience will be interested in.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a special guest today. All our guests are special, but this guy's special in a unique way. Kind of like a made man, I guess. I don't know if that's people still use that term. Please welcome Germinal Van. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thank you for having me on your platform. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, well, real quick, Joel, what's your relationship to Germinal?
Follow him on Instagram. I'm just kidding. No. Yeah, for the most part. Well, I mean, I've been interacting with him on Instagram for, I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year. Just, commenting on his, usually in chat. Just, I really appreciate a lot of his posts. And I mean, he's like you, Darnell, to some extent. I think he's an educator, but he's using his Instagram as a means to communicate ideas. Lots of well thought out ideas that, instead of maybe blogging them, he's putting them into, an Instagram post with 5 or 6 slides. And then also, there's layers to that, but I think that's the primary means that I've interacted with him. So it's been good going back and forth, and this podcast or this conversation sort of came out, and we'll get to there in a second, but after the Canadian, David Card was named as part of the Nobel Prize winner, I was like, hey, you have a really good post on this. Listen to how bad the Canadian media is commenting on this guy. And I was like, hey, do you want to come on the show and talk about it? So that's sort of, something we'll get to in a second. But
that's good. Actually, what was impressive when you sent me Germinal stuff, you were sending it, and I'm like, man, who is this black guy? Thinks he's smart. Look at this black guy thinks he's so smart. and then I'm scrolling through his page. I'm like, this guy wrote 20 books by the time he was 30. I'm like, I haven't read 20 books by the time I was 30. Right? So I was just like, okay, you know what? I need to humble myself. And go through his material. And I was just like, okay, yeah, like, definitely I feel like Germinal's platform should be bigger than what it is. But yeah, I was very impressed with it, and I was just like, okay, yeah, this guy definitely is thoughtful and has put in the work. How some people be on social media posting stuff and they haven't put in the academic rigor. They're just doing clickbait. Like, oh no. Germinal has a body of work that shows he actually does this for real. So I was like, okay, yeah, no, we need to sit down and talk with this guy. But Germinal, for our listeners who don't know you, can you give them some background on yourself?
Sure, of course. So I was born and raised in Côte d'Ivoire. So I don't know, Joel, if you speak French, but I know if you're Canadian and you live in Quebec, then
only as much as I have to.
Right, you can chit chat in French a little bit. So I'm a native French speaker. And so I grew up in Ivory Coast for a little bit. I did my elementary and secondary education there. And then when I got my baccalaureate, I came to the US to pursue my undergraduate degree in political science. I went to the Catholic University of America in 2010 and graduated in 2014. And then a year after graduating college, I went to the George Washington University to do my master's degree in politics. So I was like very into politics, running for office, and all those conventional thoughts. When you're in your 20s, you have a romantic view of the world. You think that you're going to come and save it, and you think you're going to come and save it through politics. But that was a big mistake. And I tried to go to law school for that because in the US the way the conventional way to become a politician is to become first a lawyer. You know, you go to law school, you get your law degree, then you work as a prosecutor or something for a little bit, then you get into politics. So that was the route I wanted to take. So I took the LSAT 3 times, failed, and I felt intellectually insulted. I was like, those guys are not smarter than me, and they're going to law school, and I can't even get into this. So, and I always wanted to write a book. So I was like, I'm just going to write my first book. So I wrote my first book in a matter of like weeks. I was really dedicated. I was writing 9 hours a day, every day. And so I published my first book in 2018. And then once that first book was out, the rest, is history. I was like, whatever idea came to mind, I would just go on Word and then build an outline immediately.
Okay.
And that's one of the very first things I learned when you're a writer is that whatever thought you have in mind, put it on paper. Otherwise, you might forget.
So what made you sort of, let's say, transition to writing books? Obviously being, let's call it somewhat, you were going down the professional student route almost.
Yeah.
What gave you the desire to write a book? What gave you sort of maybe thinking you had the skill set or even, the expertise to say, oh, I can write?
So in fact, I started writing a long time ago. I started writing like when I was 17 or 18, but I would start and I would never finish it. I'll never complete the whole thing.
Okay.
So, and this is something like my mom hates. It's when people start things and they never finish it. So completion is really important to me. I was like, I have to complete the work. Even if it's not perfect, at least it is completed. If it is completed, then you can adjust to make it perfect or to make it better. But at least the substance is completed. And that's what matters to me. I value efficiency over anything. So I started writing a long time, but I was never going through. And this time I decided to complete the whole project. And I will not relinquish until it's done. So I just go like full bulldozer mode and made sure that the book was done. That all the chapters that I intended to write were all written. So and plus, like, I guess when it comes to my writing skills, I guess I took that from my parents. Like, they both have law degrees. So, like, writing is something we kind of have in the family. My dad is a lawyer, always argued in court, like writing motions, doing legal research. So I guess, the French speakers, they have that touch of literature, French literature. So I guess that helped me too. And that's how I got my writing skills. Like, I always love writing. Writing is something I always practice for a long time.
So 2018, you write your first book. Where does, let's say, the self-learning, stuff come into play then in your, you talked about going to 2 different schools, and let's say starting to self-teach yourself through YouTube and other means. When did that start in your story?
You mean like at a precise moment or in my mind, that when the click started? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like when did you realize, hey, I don't need to go to school anymore. I can learn myself.
Yeah, so I mean that was pretty recent. In fact, that wasn't until like 2019, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I realized that we are so blessed. We have internet. This is perhaps the greatest resource to ever exist in the 21st century, the internet. And people are here fooling around, basically complaining about not having any. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you can learn anything you want. You have the internet, the greatest resource ever. Let me tell you this. Today, you have, like, specifically in Africa, you have kids. All they need is a phone and internet, and they become like web comedians. And now being a web comedian, it's been recognized. They have prizes for it. Those kids like are making a living off this just for having the internet.
Right.
Back then, like you have to go to an actual agency and sign a contract, and it was a process. Today, with just internet and your phone, you're good to go, and you change your life. Let me give you another example. Haha Davis. Look at this guy. 7 million people.
Haha Davis is funny.
Right? You see, like, exactly. But all this guy do is, and today this guy is hanging out with Snoop Dogg. That's the power of the internet. And Instagram is one of the greatest platforms to actually build your brand and change your life. And people are not taking advantage of it because they're not focused. That's why I always say people are not focused. That's why they fail. When you focus, no matter what you do, you're going to succeed. I can give you another example. That little black guy, Kabi, the guy who's doing, I mean, we don't see each other, so I can do the sign, but you guys know who I'm talking about, the Italian kid, the guy who lives in Italy. This guy like got fired, got on TikTok. Instead of watching people doing TikTok, making TikTok videos, he decided to make his own TikTok videos. Today, this kid worth $2 million. He's focused. If you're focused, no matter what you do, you're going to succeed. But if you're not focused, it's not going to work out.
I guess part of it too is people are looking at the old way of thinking in regards to, okay, I need to go to the gatekeepers to be, whether it's the school institution, the government, I need to go to a gatekeeper to sign off on me as a comedian, as a dancer, as a economist.
And in fact, when I start getting to economics, I thought of like, going back to school. Like I really consider, I was even looking at George Mason University to do a master's degree. I was like, okay, first, you already have a master's degree. You're going to go for a second. You're going to have to spend money instead of making money just to be an economist. I was like, you know what? I'm going to force people to recognize me as an economist, period. And the way to do that, just produce. Even haters are going to have to accept it. That was my mindset, and I went for it.
No, that's a good point. No, I just wanted to point out that on your YouTube channel, you have a lesson you did on how to become an economist without a degree. And I thought that was very empowering for me personally. And when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, you don't have to necessarily, have to go to the gatekeeper. Like if kind of like I tell this to my students, if you, whatever you want to be when you grow up, you don't need to go to school for someone to sign off on you to say that you're a hairdresser because you've been doing your sister's hair since you were 10.
Exactly.
Right. And all these other things. So it's very important that we practice being self-taught and be who you are. If you are an economist, then that's what you do. You don't need someone to sign off. If you are a pastor, right? Like you don't need to go to seminary to be a pastor. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and that's what I say. Like it's all about basically you are what you do every day. That's what it's about. If you do the same thing every single day, you are what you do every day. And it's because like people are looking for validation from others. And that's why they feel like they need to go to the gatekeepers, in order to get that approval. But as I said, like the best way, in my opinion, is to compel people to recognize your value. And by doing that is to produce. And the best is when you produce in a field where they're trying to have gatekeepers from preventing you to enter it. So that's the thing. Like that's how I saw economics. Economists that have their little circle. They all have PhDs, and they think they're like super smart. I was like, no, seriously. They all think that because they have PhDs, they're above people. I'm like, you're not above me, man. You're not above me at all. Like what you learn that too. All the models and everything. All I have to do is to sit, put YouTube on, watch YouTube tutorials. I practice. I remember my first regression. It took me 3 hours to do it because I did it by hand. I did it by hand. And the reason why is because I wanted to understand the mechanism behind it. Because I could have gone on Excel or whatever programming language and perform in 5 minutes. But what's the point to perform something you don't even understand?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I'm not a fan of SMEs. subject matter experts. Like, I
Mhm.
don't believe in that. I
Mhm.
believe that there's a point of communication where we can mutually come to a place of understanding together, and that and that's important. That you're not just relying on subject matter experts. And it comes back to the study of epistemology. How do you know that you know?
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times people are saying, "Oh, I know that I know because Germinal knows, and I trust him." Right. And people aren't, and people aren't saying, okay, well, how, like, instead of relying on a subject matter expert, we have to work hard and know these things for ourselves. And you were talking about wanted to be an economist, and I was doing in my research on you. You said you wanted to win the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
Um,
One day,
um,
hopefully.
y- yeah. Well, okay. Well, what is the Nobel Prize? Because we have the recent Nobel Prize winner,
Mhm.
David Card, who's actually from on the province that me and Joel are
Mhm.
from Ontario. And so he just recently won 2021. And he won because of his work on minimum wage, immigrants stealing jobs. But first, what is the Nobel Prize and why did you want to win it? And then just give me some commentary on Card.
Sure. So the Nobel Prize is the most coveted prize in the world. It's a life-changing prize. If you win this, it's not just about the glory, but it gives you access to things that you would never have access to if you didn't win it. That's what it comes down to. So
Oh,
today,
wow.
oh yeah, so today David Card, if he talks to Trudeau, I don't know what is his political leaning, but let's assume that he's lefty. If he talks
Mhm.
to Trudeau, Trudeau is going to listen to him.
Mm.
But before October 11th, if he talks to Trudeau, Trudeau would not listen to him. Who are you? I mean, that's how the world is, man.
Mhm.
Who are
Right.
you? Why are you wasting your time talking to me? But now you won the Nobel Prize. Whatever he says, Trudeau is going to listen. That's
Mhm.
what it is. It's a very powerful platform to get your message out there. So one thing I want is to inspire Africans to strive for intellectual pursuit, because in Africa we are very involved in entertainment, and it drives me nuts because entertainment doesn't develop a nation. No, it doesn't develop a nation. I've never seen a nation on earth that got developed through entertainment. If it was
Yeah.
the case, Brazil would have been the most powerful nation on earth for playing soccer.
Right.
But
Right.
soccer doesn't make you build bridges. It doesn't make you build your infrastructures, your hospitals,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
no,
Because I try to practice those African dances. I
right?
actually try to practice them.
And
They're really good.
no, I mean, like, Africans are really good at entertainment, but when it comes to intellectual stuff, we're not involved in it at all. And that's why we are lagging economically, politically. We are, because we don't prioritize those things. And
Mhm.
by winning the Nobel Prize, I could give an inspiration to young African kids and be like, you can be like me too if you want to. It's not about being the first African. I don't like those labels or first black, first this. No, I mean,
Wow,
just
actually, Germinal, I was just saying that to my wife the other day. Like, yeah, I hate those labels as well.
no, seriously. Like, when someone owns a business or black owned business, who cares what your skin color is, man? If you're selling a good product or service, I'll buy it. How your
Mhm.
skin color is correlated with your ability to perform. So, but anyways, the point is I want to inspire those people. And that's why I even wrote a book called The African Nobel Prize. My friend and I, we want to create something like that. Even if I don't win it, one day I want to create an African Nobel Prize to give light to African intellectuals. Because there are many African intellectuals that no one knows. Here's the thing. If you're, let's say, an economist and you've made a groundbreaking discovery, or okay, not discovery, it's not like physics, but let's say you've done a groundbreaking contribution, right? You
Mhm.
extend a theory and it's groundbreaking. But because you don't live in certain areas, your work would not be recognized. So there's certain
Mhm.
criteria that you need to meet in order to win the Nobel Prize. You need to live in the United States, Canada, and Western Europe or Japan. If you don't live there, forget about it. That's number one. Number two, you need to publish in those big journals. So the Quarterly Journal of Economics, the Journal of Mathematical Economics, the Journal of Econometrics, Econometrica, all these top 10 journals. And you need to have a ton of citations. And plus, there's a lot of politics too in it. Like what I mean by politics, like office politics, like, you know some people in the Nobel Committee and stuff like that. And also you kind of need to win the John Bates Clark Medal. It's a stepping stone to win the Nobel Prize in economics. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean that every single economist won it, but most of them, if you look at the statistics, most of them won it. Paul Samuelson won. Milton Friedman won that prize. I think Paul Krugman won it too. Yeah, so it's most of those Nobel economists, you see they at least won one or two prestigious prizes before winning the Nobel Prize. So the Nobel Prize is the culmination. It's like the Mount Everest.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's the highest honor that an economist can ever have.
So, well, that's good. I like the fact that you're instead of that idea of not asking for a seat at the table, but creating your own table.
Oh yeah,
I like that idea. And so now, in regards to David Card's work on minimum wage, that well, can you unpack like why he won?
So I made a post and Joel saw it. So I made a post about why he won, and why he won was not for the conclusion he reached, but for the method he used. So the the goal of the Nobel Prize is to essentially reward methods that are used, because specifically for economics, because the goal of the Nobel Prize is to praise scientific achievement. And the Nobel Prize consider economics as a science. So David Card used a method called natural experiment. So it's when you use observational data and you consider certain factors that cannot be added when you use randomized controlled trials. So these factors, you cannot, like the researcher cannot control it, but he used observational data to complete his analysis. So that's what he used. But it is a method that is not used by many economists. Many economists, when they use observational data, they just perform like the classical regression analysis, like I do. So what he did was kind of groundbreaking. That's why he won the prize, not because of his findings. However, it is important to stress that the Nobel Prize too is not innocent when it comes to political ideology. They've always rewarded economists that tend to be more left-wing, so Keynesians. And the reason why is because Keynesians use quantitative methods when they do their economic analysis. And why Keynesians use quantitative method when they do the economic analysis is because since they focus on the allocation of resources to some extent necessitates some planning. Because even if you run your own business, you have to plan. You have to plan where everyone goes, how much needs to be produced, and etc. So so that's why those people won more the Nobel Prize than free market economists. But now, if you notice, the free market economists that also won the Nobel Prize were the one who used quantitative methods. So at the end of the day,
Milton Friedman? Yeah,
Milton Friedman, Gary Becker, James Buchanan. So these guys. So it's at the end of the day, they prioritize quantitative methods over everything. That's the reason why Mises did not win the Nobel Prize. We all know, even though I strongly disagree with his praxeology, I must admit and recognize that Mises deserved the Nobel Prize for the work he did in the field of economics. It's undeniable. But he didn't win because the method he used was not quantitative. Now you may say, but Hayek won. Yes, he did win. But why Hayek won the Nobel Prize? Hayek won because it was purely political, in my opinion. And I explained that in my book, The African Nobel Prize. If you read the book, the first two parts are dedicated to the history of the Nobel Prize. And I even explained, I dedicated like 2 or 3 paragraphs explaining why each economist from 1969 to 1976 won the Nobel Prize. And you will see a pattern that they all use quantitative methods. So Hayek did not, because he did win the Nobel Prize, but not for his quantitative method. It's because the Nobel Prize rewarded Gunnar Myrdal, who was a socialist, but from the inception of the Nobel Prize in economics to the time Hayek won, it was only socialists and Keynesian who were winning the prize. So concerns were raised already, saying that, okay, why is it always the same political leaning winning the prize? So to tame things down, the Nobel Prize rewarded Hayek to show that they're not biased. So that's why they gave it to Hayek. But because Hayek never used quantitative methods. If it was purely a quantitative method, Hayek would have never won the Nobel Prize. But Hayek is a Nobel Prize worthy, absolutely. He's a great economist. He's even the reason why I became a classical liberal in the first place. So Hayek, to me, humbly deserved the Nobel Prize. But the reason why they gave him the Nobel Prize, deep down, were not the right reasons.
So I'm just curious, there's an aspect of the conversation around Nobel Prize that, you're referring to, the political side. You have to sort of win this prize to this prize. Does that not diminish to some extent the prize itself as acknowledging achievements, because there's this, let's call it the like special boys club in order to act, and you have to first get in the club in order to get the prize.
Well, I see what you're saying, and you're right. However, human beings love hierarchies. That's why. Because when you are the most coveted thing in the world, there are certain steps you have to take and overcome in order to reach that. And that's how the Nobel Prize positioned itself. Now, that's why you may have done, or you may done a discovery or something. You will not win the Nobel Prize immediately. It's because the Nobel Prize wants your theory or your discovery to be subject to the test of time. That's why, because they don't just reward a theory. They want to make sure that the theory is applicable. That's why this guy, his name is Henri Poincaré, French mathematician. He was nominated 58 times for the Nobel Prize in physics and never won it.
Wow.
Why? Because he was too theoretical. So it's true. Yes, you do scientific work. The theory is beautiful. But that's why I always tell people, like, a theory is not a fact. It's just an explanation to an observation. And the explanation is subjective because it is told from the researcher, based on the researcher understanding. That's why when people may observe the same fact and they have different interpretations of the same fact.
That's funny. The statement you just made is exactly why Thaddeus Russell kept calling you a postmodernist.
Yeah, I know. I know. Oh, you watched that thing?
Yeah. No, it's good. I'll make sure to put that in our show notes page. I'll put this, the stuff you've got on this Nobel winning prize as well. And I think, it's a really good point that, a lot of theory comes through observation, and also needs to be tested against observation.
Absolutely.
And so I'm curious, if you could, I do want to come back to that, because that's sort of, I definitely operate, because I don't necessarily have the time in my life to do the empirical. I definitely operate a little bit more in what are the theory, what are the principles, and now let's keep applying those things. So I'm leveraging work like that you and other people do to test these theories. But I think that comes back around really well to this guy and the work that his team. It wasn't just him, but we're focusing on him because he's Canadian, David Card. But can you speak to because this, as I said, this whole conversation sort of came out of me sending you a link from Canadian, media going like, he proved minimum wage does not cause unemployment.
He didn't prove. He perhaps falsified, because that's what Karl Popper talked about in his book, The Logical Scientific Discovery. He said that scientific laws are they're hypothetical by character. So you cannot really prove them. What you can only do is to either support or falsify them. That's why you test them.
Mm-hmm.
If a theory cannot be scientifically tested, therefore it is not scientific at all.
Mm-hmm.
So to come back to David Card, what he was able to do when it comes to his findings is to perhaps falsify a general observation. But even that falsification should not be taken as a proof, because he only went to a very specific region in the United States to conduct his research.
Mm-hmm.
And the minimum wage does not affect people the very same way. It affects people differently. And the effect of the minimum wage are not immediate as well. Mm-hmm. So when they implement the minimum wage, or when they raise the minimum wage, you may not feel the impact immediately. And that was the case even at the time of Thomas Sowell in the 1940s and 50s, because inflation was so high at that time, the minimum wage was meaningless, so it didn't matter. But then when inflation is reduced, that's when the minimum wage, you start to feel it. Because like the point that the minimum wage is reducing employment wasn't made until the 1970s or 80s, because it took time. So people should not just rush, specifically left-leaning people. They shouldn't just conclude, oh yeah, David Card proved. He didn't prove anything. He perhaps falsified a generalization, but someone else can falsify it again. That's what theories are about.
So would you say then he falsified the statement that minimum wage will cause an immediate increase in unemployment?
Yes, he did falsify that. He did falsify that, because in his research he found no evidence that the minimum wage immediately reduce employment.
So what would you then say about minimum wage, that other statements about minimum wage or let's say applications of the general idea that increasing prices will have consequences or price floors in a general economics perspective?
Yeah, I mean it's quite obvious. So I mean, you guys heard about and know about the make minimum wage living wage, but the minimum wage is basically adjust for inflation. So when they increase the minimum wage, everything increased concurrently too. Nothing is static. That's why the minimum wage can never make living wage, because when you increase the minimum wage, the market value will also increase. So the price of property will increase. The price of goods and services will increase. Rent will increase. Like, let me give you an example. If you go to Washington, D.C., where the minimum wage is $15 an hour, do you think you're going to rent a studio for $1,500? No. A simple studio, let's say in a nice area like Dupont Circle or Georgetown, would be perhaps $3,000. Yeah. And that's what people don't get. They think that when you increase the minimum wage, everything else remains constant. No, things increase too.
Right. Right.
Everything increased. That's why the minimum wage will never make living wage. Simple as that. That's a simple concept behind it. So, and plus, like, when you increase the minimum wage, like every business is not affected the same way. It depends on the capital of each business. So I may have a small business of, let's say, 20 people. But if my capital is $15 million, I don't have to fire anybody.
Yep.
I can keep all of them. I can even hire more people. The increasing the minimum wage doesn't matter to me. But if you're a small convenience store and you have like 2 or 3 people and your capital is pretty low,
like 50K,
then it's going to be difficult for you. So it really depends. It doesn't affect everyone the same way.
No, that's a really good point. A lot of times, trying to understand how these things work, can sometimes be confusing. But yeah, I thought that was very helpful. Now, you wrote a book, called Income Inequality and Economics.
Yeah.
So this still ties in, somewhat transitions out, but still ties into the minimum wage. But you wrote a book on income inequality and economics. So why is there income inequality?
There's income inequality because we have property rights. Property implies difference. And Eman Hope said, I hate Hope, but I must give him credit for this one. He said, and it is true. 2 people who manage the resources differently will have different results. Simple as that.
No, okay. Right there, we can end the show. Right there. You don't have to say no more, man. That's good.
No, like it's true, because here's the thing. Let's say, okay, you guys have your podcast, and let's say I have my own podcast too, right? And we don't have the same results because you have a strategy that you use to increase your audience. And I may use a different strategy. You may have like a different payment plan that incentivizes people to come to your show compared to mine. So if I mismanage my resources, my income will be low. I may not even have any income in the first place. So the point is that income is based on how you manage your resources. If you manage your resources well, your income will increase. If you manage your resources poorly, your income will decrease. You will drive customer and consumers away. They don't want to purchase your product or service because you suck at it. So income inequality is based on property rights, because in a country or in a society, in a market economy that has property rights, people will never have the same level of income. It's impossible. It's impossible to have the same level of income. Those who are very good at what they do will outperform the average. Look at Jeff Bezos. Look at Elon Musk. Look at those guys. They outperform everyone because they're good at what they do. So government even gives them tax incentive to keep performing. That's what happens. So, and on top of that, you also have technology that is forcing people to review their skills, because business owners don't see the point of hiring a human being to do something that a machine can do. So that creates inequality, because the person who doesn't have an income is poor, and the machine who doesn't get paid is getting all the work done, because business owners are more concerned with efficiency than anything else. So,
Right.
So does that mean that we're leading to more entrepreneurs as a consequence?
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully. And plus, the era in which we live today, the age of information, is the greatest time of our life to start a business. You start a business in your room. You don't even have to leave your room. Everything is online today.
Right.
Seriously, everything is online today. All you have to do is to go online. You purchase a LLC. You get your EIN, and you open a business bank account, and you're good to go. Start a business, and you run it until it becomes profitable. And anyone can do that today.
Yeah.
Anyone.
I think, but I think like psychologically, for some people, the rhetoric of income inequality is what people will rally around and fight for. So they're looking at, okay, well, do I become an entrepreneur or do I fight for income inequality? And so for some people, they'd rather fight for
income inequality to get what?
equal pay.
Equal pay since when?
Mm-hmm.
Since when? You're not even equal to yourself. Why do you want equal pay?
Right. Well, but it's like it's a strong moral sentiment that people have, that people are constantly repeating this idea, and so you would have, you're definitely going to have people say, okay, well, you know what, I want to fight for that instead of income inequality, instead of go through the rigors of capitalism and entrepreneurship.
Well, and that's why they will always lag. Simple as that. Because here's the thing, that people don't understand that it's important to understand the system in which you live if you want to make it. Rich people understand the rules of the system, and based on these rules, they know when to go around those rules. They know when to apply them. They know when to respect the rules. They know when to disobey those rules. If for instance, people complain about, the middle class pays too much taxes. Yeah, but the IRS said it is perfectly legal to avoid paying taxes. It is written. You guys can Google it. Yep. It's perfectly legal to avoid paying taxes. I did not say not paying taxes. I said avoid.
Yes.
And how do you avoid paying taxes? You become a business owner and you write off business expenses. Workers are not business owners, so they cannot write off anything. That's why they pay more taxes. Simple as that.
And right. I think 2 episodes ago we had it's essentially tax avoidance as opposed to tax evasion.
Yeah, yes. The episode was the Pandora Papers. We did episode 129, and we were just talking about the Pandora Papers and tax evasion versus tax havens, and are the rich paying their fair share? And is So it was really good. But part of it is this comes back to the basics of financial literacy.
Yes.
Which still falls under the umbrella of economics, which is the science of making choices or the reallocation of scarce resources.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, people do not want to go through the rigor of a market economy. And
because it's hard work.
Yeah, it is, because when you start a business is like a plant. You have to water it until it grows, until it becomes profitable. People hate Jeff Bezos, but this guy's giving job to 1 million people. That's a lot of people lifted out of poverty. When the guy started, it wasn't necessarily born poor, but you see, there's one thing that people don't understand. They say, he XYZ comes from a rich family. But he could have still messed up. In every rich family, they have rotten kids who you give them all the capital they need to become independent, and they still blow that capital away. Look at the Vanderbilt family. The Vanderbilt messed up everything. So it's not guaranteed. It's not given. Sure, you have an edge. You have an advantage compared to others based on the family you're from. Good. But there is no guarantee that because you come from a very rich family, therefore your future is secured. It is not. Specifically, if you're meant to become an entrepreneur. That's what it is. So let's take someone like Ken Griffin, for instance. So Ken Griffin comes from a wealthy family, or even Bill Ackman. They both come from wealthy families. They both went to Harvard. But what Ken Griffin did, Ken Griffin started coding at a time when no one knew about coding. He was ahead of the game. He was already a computer nerd. He understood derivatives and trading options at age 18 or 19. He opened his first hedge fund right after college. Are you going to get mad at him for being successful today? He could have been like, I'm home. No problem. My dad is rich anyways. I'm waiting for him to die. I'm going to inherit whatever assets he has. But he didn't. He went his own way. Are you going to get mad at him for earning $100 million per month? Are you going to get mad at him for to have a net worth of like $17 billion today?
I hope not. But I mean, obviously some people do, right? Like, and I think there's probably economic ignorance is a huge factor in sort of that perspective. Now, you know, as we were discussing this idea of entrepreneurship and whatnot, how much do you think, like, if I think about the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, you know, he talks a lot about there's this, you know, the education system really is training people to be employees. And be, to some extent, being an employee is a risk adverse solution. I don't want to bear the burden. I don't want to. And so do you think that that's a huge factor that leads to the income inequality as the means of fighting, you know, my poverty or poverty as opposed to create wealth creation?
So here's the thing. The school system indeed trains people to become employees. That's what it is, because you go to school, you get your degree, and then you go in the labor market and hope to be employed. And then once you're employed, progressively, it disincentivizes you to take risk. You're making money every 2 weeks, you're getting your paycheck, you live comfortably. So you're like, why would I
building a pension?
Exactly. Why would I blow everything away and start something with no guarantee that it will be successful? That's the thing. So it disincentivizes people literally, not immediately, but gradually, to not take risk. But when you're an employee, there are many things that you don't do that the owner of the business where you work at does. First of all, when you work, you finish at 5. When I say 5, it's not necessarily 5 flat, but you know, you work, you don't have the responsibilities that the owner has. The owner is the one that has to do the bookkeeping, checking the expenses. Do they have enough in the account to pay all their employees and stuff? People don't care about those things. To them, like, they think that the salary comes from, it fall off the sky. But if the company doesn't have enough money in their account to pay their employees, they have to close. And who would be losing? The employee. If the company closed, the employee would just build up his resume and apply somewhere else. But what about the business owner? The capital that he used to start, and it fails, he has to pay people back. Imagine all the debts and liabilities that he put down, all the collateral damage. And this is how people don't think about.
So, you know, how do we, let's say, change? Like, I mean, my thought is not changing the academics of, you know, or the path that academics, feeds people into the labor market necessary to, you know, change the cultural perspective that, oh, well, technology means we need UBI, right? Like, is there, you know, and I know you're part of, like, you're a lecturer for the online, I think it's Udemy. I might not say that properly. Right? Like, what things do you see that culturally need to shift such that, you know, the UBI solution that you know, let's say, as technology is going to take over everything, so we need UBI, is sort of, I think, is the employee solution, because I no longer am going to be able to be an employee. So what do you see as needing to change in order to sort of shift that mindset?
Well, is to include financial literacy. But financial literacy is never included in any curriculum for a purpose. That's the thing, because the school system trains people, grooms people to be employees. If people are financially literate, they're not going to be employees. What is important to understand is that every single human being is a company. You, as a human being, you can start your own LLC. Joel can start his own LLC. Anybody can start his own LLC.
Yeah. No, I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that Jay-Z has a quote, and he says, "I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman."
Man, yeah. Exactly.
Right? Like, he is the business, not that he does business.
Yeah, exactly. Like just the three of us talking, this is 3 companies talking. Right here. And the 3 of us, this is basically, each of us can hire anyone else as a company.
Hmm. Yeah, but I think also with the idea of financial literacy
Mhm.
in schools, and it's in the math curriculum, and we did an episode on the math curriculum, and so, but part of, like you said, being an entrepreneur and being financial literate, in the book, Why A Students Work for C Students and B Students Work for the Government by Robert Kiyosaki, he makes the argument that, yeah, the school says they're teaching financial literacy, but he's like, true financial literacy is capitalism,
Yeah.
and they're not teaching that.
Nope. Nope.
So
They're
it's
not.
not actually financial literacy that you're learning.
No, it's not. It's not the. Honestly, the best way to learn something is by doing. That's like, if for someone to truly learn financial literate, like to be financially literate, it simply has to educate themselves every day on it. And as
Yes.
we all know, this is something you don't get in textbooks. This is
Right.
stuff like you go on YouTube, then you watch like tutorials, videos about finance. That's how I did. And I even started my own investment fund that I don't talk about, but Joel is following that page too. Yeah, well, yeah, I started my own investment fund. And a couple years ago,
It's an LLC.
yep, I hated finance, but I understood that if you want to be rich in life, you need to have a business. There's no other way. You're not going to be rich off your salary. Your salary is just meant for you to survive, meaning paying your bills, uh, putting food on the table, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But not like to actually have wealth. You only have wealth by creating a business and investing in the stock market, or real estate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think just simply like the idea that, if you use value as a way to communicate it, right? As an employee, there's no way you're going to get more than you're not even going to get close to the value you're contributing, because someone else is employing your labor and as a means to create value. You
Yeah.
as an employee generally aren't the one creating the value. You're the one fulfilling a task someone else has implemented in order to create value.
Exactly. That's why the labor theory of value is nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. No, well, it's funny because, like, you're giving us these great principles for economic empowerment, and you as a Black man, um, who's making the right decisions and has a great understanding of economic mobility. Now, you wrote 2 books, uh, Black America and the Illusion of Political Power, and
Mhm.
The Economic Condition of Black America in the 12th Century. So my question to you is,
20th century.
oh, sorry, 20th century. So my question to you is, how are Black Americans doing economically?
Well, when you look at the data, we are the poorest community in the US, not just in the US, but everywhere. Or
And that's
every
because of racism?
cut me a slack, man. Hell no.
Well, come on. Well, why are you laughing, Joel? Why are you laughing, man?
Because I
Hell no.
know what he's going to say.
Hell no. Hell no. If it was because of racism, no Black man on earth would have been rich in the Western world. So no, it's not because of racism. It's because of personal responsibility. It's because we're not focused. It's because we focus on things that are not relevant to the economic development of the Black community. It's that simple. As I said,
Okay.
I come back to my initial point. We don't focus on science and intellectual stuff. We focus on entertainment, and entertainment doesn't develop a society.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm gonna give you some pushback on
Mhm.
this. Okay. So in economics, we use the term the invisible hand.
Mhm.
So in I guess you could say in social justice thought, there's the invisible hand of the white man.
Mhm.
Um, and it
Do
keeps
you mean George Soros?
yeah, the invisible hand of the white man that that is working behind the scenes to keep Black people from progressing. So we know that Black people are not progressing. We're not being as great as they can be because our stats don't equal the same as our other race groups, other counterparts. So because we're not equal to them, we don't see equity. We know that racism is there and it's stopping Black people. What would you say to that?
Nonsense. So here's the thing. James Fortin, right? He was a sailmaker from Philadelphia. He invented a sail-making device that enabled him to create a highly profitable business. By 1830, I'm reading what I wrote in my own book, The Economic Condition of Black America.
Okay.
20th century. By 1830, he was worth an estimated $100,000, which is approximately $2.5 million today when adjusted for inflation. So this Black man here started a business, and by 1830, he was worth $100,000. 1830, slavery was a legal institution in the United States. And you have a Negro. I use the word Negro, yes. You have a Negro who has a net worth of $100,000. At the time slavery was legal. That answers your question. How come a Negro in the 19th century, at the time where slavery was legal, was worth more than most white folks?
Well, I'm not familiar with this story.
What's it?
Yeah. No, I'm not familiar with this story, but like would somebody say, maybe somebody might say, okay, the white man empowered him and made him rich. Can I say that?
Yeah, sure. But how they made him rich? That's a question. How?
Freedom?
He started business. He was selling a product or a service. They liked the product or the service, and they decide to buy it despite the racial bias, because we have to be honest, white folks at that time were not woke. In the 1830s, no one was woke. So definitely they have racial bias. But they put that aside and decide to purchase whatever he was selling them because they like the service.
Yeah, it's funny because I also think about Madam C.J. Walker, and she was an African American entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a political social activist, and she's recorded as the first female self-made millionaire in America in the Guinness Book of World Records. And she was born 1867, died 1919. Right, so she's still at in the peak of a racist culture, and she was able to become a millionaire. And think she's selling like Black hair products, right? So this comes back to, well, we can make an argument that the white man could not have helped her, but that and I would also argue that this isn't an issue of people buying Black. I don't think this is an argument where people say, oh, yo, buy Black. Well, no, this isn't buying Black. Even though she was selling Black products, she was providing a service to Black people that Black women needed. That Black women needed it. It wasn't like they're like, okay, well, I'm going to buy it because she's Black. Well, I'm going to buy it because I need my hair to be conditioned and to be healthy. That came before it.
The dumbest insight would be, oh, I'm buying this because of his skin color. There is absolutely no correlation between the quality of the service or product you're selling and your skin color. There's absolutely, even if you're Black and you're selling Black products, does it mean that the product is good because it's for Black people? No. No. The product is good only if it provides value to the person who purchases it.
Right. And that's like the essence of entrepreneurship, and in the sense that even capitalism, that you're providing a service that nobody else can provide. If you can provide a service that nobody else can provide, then you can corner your niche or your market, so that you'll have customers. Now, of course, now the hard part about
Mhm.
entrepreneurship is
Mhm.
customer service.
Yeah.
Like that's the hard part, right? To
It
keep
is.
to keep
Oh
the
yeah, absolutely.
customers and keep producing,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know. Yeah, but
So,
I guess, from the black perspective,
mhm.
um, you know, black people are raised to see certain things, and white people are not raised to see certain things. So, for example, um, most black people are anti-capitalist, in the sense that, yeah, they blame capitalism for the plight. So
Yeah.
so and so and I wrote an article on it, about Ibrahim Kendi. Ibrahim
Yeah.
Kendi's work, how to be an anti-racist, and he's an anti-capitalist, and I was just saying, well, that, how is it that he's anti-capitalist, but he's benefiting and he's profiting from capitalism with his book sales and being able to leverage that to build other platforms at academic institutions? That's capitalism. And
Yeah.
so what I was seeing was that his anti-capitalism ideas
Mhm.
um, mirrored that of slave masters, because they were anti-capitalist as well, in
Mhm.
the sense that they were denying black people their own property right.
Yeah.
But yeah, but what would you say to black people who are anti-capitalist or anti yeah.
So the thing with black people being anti-capitalist is a false concept that the Marxian Leninist theory was put into their head. And that started with Pan-Africanism, So Lenin wrote a book on imperialism saying that imperialism is the reason why we have colonization and, African countries are poor and everything. First and foremost, why black people are so poor. Here's the thing. When slavery started, first of all, slavery exists for a very, very long time. It didn't start just with black people. But how slavery with black people occurred? It occurred because in order to weaken a, a particular group, you need to know the weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses of black people is that we're not united. We When you see your African fellow man being successful at something, instead of supporting him, you hate him. So it was easier for white folks to use that to enslave black people. Because when they came in Africa, most of the slaves were from the inland. White people were so racist that they would just stay on the coast. They would not go in the inland. They don't know anybody there. So who brought those slaves, those black men from the inland into the coast? Someone has to do it. It was their fellow black men. They
Mhm.
were selling each other. So that was perhaps the greatest weakness that we have in the community, and white folks understood that, and they simply exploited. And this same concept is reflected in the 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 field Negro and the house Negro, where the house
Mhm.
Negro fell to when if you guys watch Django, you guys
Yep.
perhaps like
Yep.
saw this concept. So we say like the field Negro is inferior, the house Negro who lives with the white slave master feels more superior and stuff.
Mhm.
And then now the concept of Pan-Africanism grew from that, and saying that in order for black people to be liberated, they need to fight against capitalism. But they clearly didn't understand that the definition of capitalism the uh, is the private means of production. It is when the means of production are privately owned. It means that you need to have property rights. You cannot have capitalism without property rights. And they thought that by having socialism, by using the dependency theory, they will be able to liberate themselves. And here's the hypocrisy too. When black people got their freedom, when slavery was abolished, right? A lot of blacks went back to Africa and they settled in this piece of land called Liberia. That's where the word Liberia comes from, means freedom.
Mm.
Yeah, Liberia, it's basically one of the countries that was never colonized. It was, in fact, where the former slaves settled for those who wanted to go back to Africa after slavery.
Okay.
And what happened? The freed slaves who settled in Liberia enslaved the indigenous Liberians.
Really?
Look it up.
Really?
Look it up. The first indigenous Liberian president, his name is Samuel K. Doe. Samuel K. Doe. The Doe is DOE. Samuel
Mhm.
K. Doe. He was the first Black African Liberian president.
Mhm.
Before that, all of them were descendants of free slaves. They created they completely ostracized Liberian society. So you have basically the slave masters, so the masters of Liberian society, who were the freed slave, and all the indigenous Liberians were the poor. Literally, what happened to them here? they replicate the same thing in Liberia.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So the concept of like, oh, we need socialism to free us against capitalism is nonsense. And now to come back to Abraham Kendi, what Kendi is doing is what Marx and Engels did. They say they're anti-capitalist, and yet Marx lives in England. He goes to the library every day, right, making money, drinking his coffee, and talk about how capitalism is bad. And yet, for people who want to visit his grave, they got to pay.
Mhm.
So he's still making money even in his death.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people who always say the anti-racist, the anti-capitalists they are the complete opposite of what they say.
Yeah.
Because
And even
to
like,
me, to me, like, if you say you are an anti-capitalist, please leave the market economy and go live in a place where there is no market economy. At least stand by your words. But you can't say you're anti this and you live in the place you live in the place you're completely against about. It doesn't make sense.
And reaping the benefits of that system.
Yeah, exactly. And you say, "Oh, I'm anti-capitalist." Move to Venezuela. Move to Cuba. Move to North Korea.
But that's not real socialism,
right? Because it fails. But socialism is doomed to fail because you abolish private property.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, since we're on the topic of race and capitalism and being black, some of the work of Thomas Sowell was my introduction to economics. He's a black economist, and he was just talking about like the idea of the word capitalism isn't even a word that capitalists use, or it was a name given to people who actually believed in the free market.
Yeah.
But like Marx was using the term capitalism to call, that's what he was calling people who believed in the free market.
Yeah.
And Sowell is just arguing that capitalism is not a system. He's like, it's not a system. It's a market with little government intervention.
Yeah.
Where people are free to make trade as they please.
Absolutely, yeah, and he's right. Marx, in fact, used capitalism in a derogatory sense. Is to make the owners of the means of production feel guilty about the wealth. Is to make them feel bad about it. Like, oh, you're capitalist. You're depriving people. You have all the capital for yourself. Me personally, I know I'm a big capitalist and I'm proud of it. I don't know why people like it's. If there's one thing I really hate, is poverty. There's nothing good about being poor. People should not be proud to be poor. Oh yeah, we're the poor, we're the good guys. Like they always try to make people think like, oh, the poor are the good guys, the rich are the bad guys.
Yeah, But you know what? I'd also add, like, and I guess, like, from me, because I look at things through a theological framework,
Mhm,
and so the idea of sin and
mhm,
people doing wrong,
mhm.
I don't think that it's associated with a particular
Social class.
school of thought. Yeah, school of thought. So, for example, um, you know, people who are capitalists can be evil,
Mhm,
right? They can be bad people. They could be good people. People who are socialist could be good people. They could be bad people.
mhm.
But capitalism doesn't make people bad. Socialism doesn't make people good. People are going to make their decisions. But I would say certain types of certain ideologies will incentivize better behavior. So hence why the free market will incentivize better behavior, because if you treat your customers well and you provide services people need, you'll be rewarded by your customers or even by the government,
Mhm.
in the sense that
Absolutely.
you'll get those tax exemptions the better you do, and the more service you provide,
Mhm.
versus an incentive in a socialist perspective, where you're incentivized not to do anything but to take from others.
Yeah, absolutely. I entirely agree. It's capitalism is about serving the free market. The free market is about serving your fellow man. It's
Hmm.
about, it's, and that's what Adam Smith said. It's people serving the fellow man by pursuing the self interest.
Yes, yes,
And
and yeah, go ahead.
and there is nothing. And to me, the righteous way to become a good person is to provide a service to people. So that's why when entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos are so rich, I don't know why people are mad. I say, like, you have there are generally two ways to become extremely wealthy. By, first it was the aristocrat. The aristocratic class, in fact, was created basically once a war occurred, and the victory side was taking all the material wealth of the losing side, and that's how they create the wealth, and then they passing on to the generations. But these people didn't create wealth the proper way. And then you have the entrepreneur who take risk, who take his capital without a guarantee that his idea will be successful, create something that provides value to people and to society as a whole. He's making
Hmm.
money off that, and people are mad. He
Hmm.
Yeah.
hasn't he hasn't killed anyone. He hasn't steal from anyone. So why are you mad?
Hmm.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
Compared
think.
No.
with the aristocrat, like people like Marie Antoinette, all these rich aristocrats in the 1700s in Europe, who basically built their wealth from stealing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had an
No.
episode with Holly Fretwell from Perk, and we titled it "Raid versus Trade." Right, like
Right?
Yeah.
that's essentially what you're talking about, right? That it's a dichotomy between you got your wealth by stealing it, or
Yeah.
raiding other people and acquiring it, or you traded and created wealth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you look at Mensa Musa, when people thought, oh, Mensa Musa is the richest man of all time. Well,
Hmm.
when we compare Mensa Musa to J.D. Rockefeller, Mensa Musa created his wealth by war, killing people.
Yes.
All the people that were living in the Mali Empire were his
Hmm.
subjects. It was the Leviathan. Whatever resources in that land was his. Everything that was happening was his. But J.D. Rockefeller started not necessarily that poor, but he didn't finish high school. He started his business and created value to people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we actually did an episode, Who Wants to Be a Billionaire? And we talked
I want
about
to be a billionaire.
Mansa Musa.
Yeah,
We
who
talked.
doesn't?
Talked about Mansa Musa, but we looked at how those billionaires created their wealth. That's what Joel and I were investigating. Like, okay, these guys are rich. How did they get their money? And I think, to kind of point back to what you were saying, Germinal, about people hating those who are doing well. Yeah, I think of a quote from the rapper Nas, um, from the song "You Can Hate Me Now," and he says,
Right?
"People hate what they don't understand. People
Exactly.
fear what they don't understand. Hate what they can't conquer." Right?
Exactly.
And so that and people are ignorant. So the idea is like, even just generate, even as we talk about capitalism, just to be clear, like, we don't live in a pure capitalistic economy, right? It's not a pure free market that we live in. There's no such thing, right? And I think it's important for people to know that all of our economies are a mixture of both social control and free market.
The truth is, the free market is an ideal. It has never existed. The same way communism has never existed. They're both ideals. It's something we aspire to, but it has never existed. Even Adam Smith, who theorized about the free market, he supported some government intervention. Sure, very minimal, but still. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there was some stuff that he saw government was necessary, like building some infrastructures, which is, to some extent, I don't disagree with that. But the free market has never ever existed per se. It's something we keep aspiring to, but I don't think we will ever achieve that.
I agree.
So I want to slightly transition, but I think there's when you guys were talking about the successful, let's say, entrepreneurs during the time of slavery, and then it ties into what you're just talking about now. What was interesting is those people, while they may not have a legally protected property right, the people they were interacting with voluntarily recognized their property rights because they recognized that not stealing from them, i.e. not making them a slave of them, was going to be more prosperous by continuing to engage in trade. And so this idea of, voluntarily allowing that person to preserve their property right was more advantageous. And so it sounds like, when you're talking about minimal government, protecting property rights and, preventing the unjust enslavement of another, is where you see the role of government. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit. And maybe I'll follow up a little bit with Frederick Bastiat's The Law, because
sure. So sure. So that's where I've always come into a staunch disagreement with ANCAPs. So I've always seen government as a necessary evil. We do need government. Now the question is to what extent we do need government. And I believe that we need government for basic protection. We need government to protect us against foreign enemies, but also against domestic enemies. And we need government to secure our properties. So if someone, for instance, trespass into my property, I can go to the court of law, and the court of law will adjudicate on the case. So that it is for those reasons that we do need government. And I also see government building some infrastructures to some extent, because like some roads and bridges, I think they can either be built by private means too, that's fine, or by the government too. I'm not against the government building roads. But the anarcho-capitalists are saying we don't need government for this and that and that and that. Here's the thing. The problem is that I think, first of all, they have a very naive approach to human nature. This approach to human nature is that they think that just by incentive, people will having incentive, people will respect each other. But in every society, you always have a madman somewhere that always want more than anyone else. And the greatest vice of human nature is domination. We always aspire to dominate others. That's why slavery exists. Because slavery is simply dominating the other person. Like, you see your neighbor, he has less than you, so you enslave him. And you're making, you're turning to your property and stuff like that. But that's and that is the fundamental vice of human nature, is domination. So in a society where we do not have a third party to protect our basic rights, it's a matter of time before another form of slavery takes place. But the ANCAPs are arguing because the thing is logically makes sense. They think it's fine. But I'm like, can you guys stop doing thought experiment?
Mm-hmm.
Because thought experiment doesn't mean it is necessarily true. You're carrying an experiment in the imagination. That's what thought experiment is. And they hold on to it as if it was the word of the Bible. I'm like, get out of here. You don't, no, seriously, like they don't understand it. Like, at the end of the day, let's say we have no government, but let's say there's a plane flying above your house. And that plane is flying, I don't know, like 1,000 feet above your house. Is that plane violating your property?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have government to determine what are the legal rights for property, how would you know them? No one would, because people will always fight about what is theirs.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important to have a government to at least protect those basic things. I'm not saying that government should be here and do everything. Of course not. You guys know I'm a staunch advocate of classical liberalism and the free market. But the free market only works properly when you have a system protected by laws. Investors will never invest in a system that is unstable. And how is a system stable when the rule of law is applied and maintained? And who applied the rule of law is government. You need government to apply the rule of law.
Yes. Okay. Well, okay. Let me ask you this then, because I know you've done work on what's going on in Africa, and still tying this back to race and government. So, like politically, like people will say the problem with Africa is was imperialism, was the white man coming and ruining Africa. But now that the white man's been removed and you have black leadership, what's wrong with Africa politically?
Rent seeking.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, rent seeking.
We've spoken about that. But
right?
but for those who don't know what rent seeking is, what is rent seeking?
So rent seeking is basically when people use public resources to build their own wealth without creating new wealth for society as a whole. So that's what rent seeking is. It's like you use resources that are not yours to build your personal wealth, and the personal wealth that you build doesn't contribute to the wealth of society.
Like lobby. We call them lobby groups. That lobby the government.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Lobby groups, log rolling. Yep. Those things. Yeah.
So what's wrong? So what would you say is the problem with what's going on on the political system in certain African countries? I should say.
Well, first of all, the rule of law is something that is not. So the rule of law in Africa is not applied. You see, in Western countries, the rule of law it's a cultural thing. If there's one thing that white people successfully did was to develop a cultural behavior of the rule of law. So they always made sure that they respect what they wrote. So whatever is written in the Constitution, or whatever policy or regulation that is written, they respect it. They apply it on themselves too. In Africa, it is extremely rare to see a head of state leaving power on his own. That's why you always see coup d'etat there. Every time they have coup d'etat. Why? Because people don't respect what they write down. They don't respect their constitutions. They don't respect their charts. They don't respect their policies, the regulations. They don't respect any of that. On top of that, politics is a business there. Politics is perhaps like one of the fastest way to build wealth for yourself. That's why there's so much corruption in African politics. African politics is not about ideology. It's about
access to power.
Access to power and clientelism, when you actually pay people to vote for you. Yeah, like that's
what?
Africa.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called lobbying in Canada.
Yeah, it's lobbying. About? It's the same thing. It's just that here. It's just that here you guys do it like legally. That's all. You guys legalize it. It's corruption. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's like basically pay people to vote for you. It's like, you see, for instance, let's say you you create a political party. So in Africa, at least in the West, the members of the political party are the one making donations to the party for the party to grow its capital. In Africa, it's the opposite. You have to have a lot of money in order to start in politics, because you're the one that will be feeding your voter, your members of the party, so that to incentivize them to vote for you. Like, most people don't understand why they even vote there. Because we don't do politics based on ideology. It's based on the person you like, or he's from the same tribe as yours, and stuff like that. That's why. And we don't have, as I said, we did not develop a cultural behavior of the rule of law. We never prioritized the law to be the thing above anything else. We never subject ourselves to the law. Our vision of the law has always been that of Louis XIV, like Le Roi Soleil, I am the law. So whoever is in power is the law, right? So it's those things that basically made Africa pretty backward, specifically in the political sense. We never respect our institutions. We have a huge issue with respecting the law of our institutions. In America, we strongly respect the institutions, and not just in America, but in the West, we respect our institutions. That's why Western countries are so advanced, because they understood that in order to build a stable society where we can create value and wealth, we need to have a society that is peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Money doesn't like a place where there is no stability. You cannot have money if there is no stability.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We did an episode where we were talking about, foreign aid. I can't remember the episode off the top of my head. I'll probably put it in the show notes page. But, what you were discussing about power and corruption and, I can't remember the term you used for it, but I jokingly referenced lobbying here. The issue we identified, and a lot of economists have identified with foreign aid, is that you're essentially funding those people who don't have a vested interest in actually bringing up the wealth of their nation, but actually they're using those funds to maintain their political power.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, giving out just enough breadcrumbs to, sort of perceive that the foreign aid is effective. And I'm just curious if you have maybe done some work on that or some insights onto the failures of foreign aid.
No, I haven't done any particular work on this yet, but you're actually pitching a new idea here. I should do more research and do and conduct a statistical analysis on the impact of foreign aids on the creation, or should I say the improvement of people's economic condition. So no, but I haven't done any specific work yet.
Mm-hmm. But I think the culture that you're describing is why the foreign aid, at least from the research we did, what we brought up in that episode,
Mm-hmm.
demonstrates that it really isn't achieving the means, because there's rent seeking that goes on, and you're giving the money to corrupt political leaders.
Exactly. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's political leaders there. We don't have strong audits. We don't. It's you see, all of this is about the rule of law. The rule of law is simply an idea. It's an ideal of not seeing yourself above the rules of society. That's all. That's what the rule of law is.
Yeah.
Is that everyone is subject to the same laws.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're the president or you're a shoemaker, the law applies to everyone else. Maybe sure, the treatment might be different, but the law applies to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
But in Africa, we did not develop that. We have, because African culture, we have that cultural feature of having a respect for our elders, a respect for the authoritative figure. So when you are in a position of power, we consider you as the authoritative figure. And therefore, whatever you say, for specifically for people who are not that educated, they will just blindly follow what you're saying. without really questioning. But that was the same in Europe too during the Middle Age. It was the same too. That's when, liberalism came, when people start questioning the decision making of authoritative figures, the church, the kings, the emperors. People started to question their decision making. That's when liberalism was created as a principle and as a political ideology. So, but liberalism is not applicable in our culture, in African culture, because African culture is not a liberal culture, in the sense that in African culture, you don't get to question authority like that.
Okay. I
No,
kind of like.
seriously.
Hold on. I was gonna say. It's funny you say that because so I go to church. My church is in the heart of the city,
Mhm.
very multicultural, and a lot of my students are Congolese,
Mhm.
right? And so when they're about to graduate school or whatever, and I'll give them my advice about you know um doing what they want to do. They say, well, no, my parents tell me
Yeah,
what to do. They tell
exactly.
me what my career is going to be. And I'm like, well, no, they can't tell you what your career is going to be because it's your life and you're grown. I'm like, yo, you a grown man. You know what I mean? But they'll be like, well, no, you can't question authority like that. That's not how
Exactly.
it works in the African home, Darnell. Maybe
Oh
in
yeah.
Jamaica, maybe Jamaicans, you guys in the Caribbean, you guys can do whatever you want. But it's like, is us Africans? Nah, man,
I
we
know,
can't do what we
and
want.
that. Yep. Now you understand it's in African culture. That's what I meant. But interestingly, for me, it wasn't really the case. My parents never forced me to do something I didn't really want. My parents are pretty westernized, as a matter of fact. So I'm like really an exception. I'm a outlier. I'm a real exception to the rule, because a typical conservative African family, no, you do as they say. African culture is very conservative. It's a very conservative culture. You don't question authority. Yeah, and a typical African parent will always say, so long as you live under my roof, you follow my rules. That's the typical African parent. He say, whenever you start making your money and you leave, that's up to you. You do what you want, but so long as you live in my house, it's my rules. So if I say don't go out, so if I say by 9 o'clock you have to be home, you better be home by 9.
That's the Western culture has definitely got a little more rebellious nature to especially towards parents.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I want to circle back around because I think as much as you were criticizing, let's say the ANCAP perspective, there you made a really good comment regarding roads, but you sort of also referenced the idea that you didn't say this explicitly, but I see you talking about, well, I'm not opposed to competition with regards to roads, and I think a lot of the ANCAP position, or let's say counter argument to what you said would be that government monopoly has prevented the ability for entrepreneurs to create solutions to these problems. And so there's an aspect, and I think along those lines, there is a valid question that I think you would agree with, that I would argue we don't actually wrestle with enough, which is the concept of how do we do justice enforcement, right? So, the critique, I brought that up, or that question was sort of what I talked about through when we did an episode on defunding the police and all those arguments. Right. Though there's no conversation about, okay, how do we do justice enforcement more justly? Because we can see many injustices in that case. The reason I want to bring up, the ANCAP pushbacks is, I think you would argue monopolies are bad. And so, would you then qualify yourself as with a political view? We want to minimize the government monopoly as much as possible.
I mean, that's at least that's the least we could do.
Now,
of course, minimize government monopoly.
Now, what, with respect to the rule of law, as the dilemma, I would argue, is that the current system, the North American system, the Western democracies. I think it's Winston Churchill is like, it's a horrible system, but it's the best system we've ever had. I could be brutalizing the quote and the person, but what comes to my mind is, like, if you look at law right now, we don't have equal treatment under the law. If you have access to resources, you have a different treatment than under the law, because you can access lawyers and different things in a way that fundamentally changes the probabilities of certain outcomes. And so how do we look at, let's say, the ANCAP criticisms and start to say, okay, yes, we need to incorporate these things to remove the problems that you would argue would happen under their system, but are clearly happening under the system we have today?
So one thing I would say is to basically either minimize or even eliminate office politics. Because let's say, for instance, the police, right? One of the reasons why the police is doing what they're doing is because they have qualified immunity. So if you remove, for instance, qualified immunity, it's going to change the rules. And that's what public choice theory explains, is that the change of rules determine a change of behavior. It's like changing gears. Let me give you an analogy. Do you guys watch soccer?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say, for example, who is your favorite free kick taker?
Well, I mean, can you not pick Ronaldo?
Okay, so you have Ronaldo, you have Pirlo, Ronaldinho, Juninho, all these guys. So let's pick Juninho, for instance, because Juninho is known for that.
Okay.
If the rule of having free kick did not exist in soccer, Juninho would have been completely useless. It's true. That's how soccer is. Like, not just soccer, but the point is to say that certain rules make certain things extremely relevant. So I think that if you apply a new rule, for instance, for the police, let's say we completely get rid of qualified immunity, then police officers would be more hesitant to use excess of force against civilians, because they know that, everything is now put on camera. They know that if they use that, specifically if they don't have qualified immunity, their pension, everything is out. But because that rule still stands, that's why they allow themselves to behave like that. So I think it's just a matter of changing the rules. Changing the rules will force people to adjust their behaviors.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about, Frederick Bastiat's that let's call it essay, but the book, The Law, he really points out that we have legalized, I mean, he uses legalized plunder as an example, but things that we don't allow the individual citizen to do, we allow the government to do, and then we allow it to continue to expand, right? In ways that, and if we sort of held that principle that, okay, if we're going to allow the government to do something the general population can't do, we should be very, very skeptical of allowing that.
Yeah, because and the reason why is because the government is run by men too. Yeah, the government is run. Institutions are run by human beings. It's not robots who are running those institutions. They're human beings too, and that's why they argue again in public choice theory. That's why they say politics without romance. Look at politics from a scientific, economic standpoint. The people in politics have aspirations, and they're governed by the self-interest the same way people in the private sectors are too. So they're no different from us. So we have to see them and judge them the same way we judge entrepreneurs, meaning that in order for people to not abuse their position of power, you have to change the rules, because the rules will force them to adjust themselves. So I think the best way now to change the rules, for instance, is through a referendum, like changing amendments and constitutions. I strongly believe in those things. Like, I think those things are possible. I don't think getting just rid of the government will solve the problem, because getting rid of the government will simply give birth to a new state led by corporations. That's what it is. It's just a bunch of corporations now acting as a state.
Well, the state, the only counter argument to that, I would say, is a corporation is a creation of the state.
Okay, sure. Yeah, corporations are a creation of the state.
Like without the state, you don't have a corporation. There is no, the enforcement of the rules that garner that system don't exist.
But here's the thing, though. Look at Amazon for now.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon is a corporation. Let's say we completely get rid of the US government. Amazon is still here.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, Apple, so basically the GAFAs will become the new state because they're the ones controlling free speech. Can you imagine Twitter ban the president of the United States?
Yeah.
This is powerful, man.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think there's a fair point that, like, we can't turn into Ancapistan tomorrow and pretend like, all of the current systems problems just go away. Because, I mean, almost all of the big tech companies have relationships or funding from historical government scenarios.
Yes.
Right. And so I think where we would definitely agree on and where the criticisms from the ANCAP world would be that our corporations are becoming more and more crony capitalist in nature. And that is, the biggest aspect of our problems, because we're allowing corporate and lobby interests to wield the monopoly power.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's. I think maybe we'll have to bring you back and we can talk through some of that a little bit more.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, the NCAP question is it's a little complicated. Personally, I'm more in favor of having a minarchy state than a completely anarcho-capitalist state, because at least, I really believe that we still do need some sort of government. At least for the very basic stuff. I'm not saying that we need it for more, but at least when it comes to private property, if your property is being violated, you want it to be able to at least resort to the court of law, to get justice.
Yeah.
And in an ANCAP, if the law is privatized, I don't think the law will serve people at least equally. In terms of the process, instead of due process. I think whoever pays the most money to the judges will get his due process.
Yeah, I think you're, essentially, it's a great sort of summary of all of this conversation about that. At the end of the day, preservation of property rights is fundamental for capitalism. It does create inequality, but it also creates wealth creation. And I would argue, and I'm sure you would, and Darnell would, that we need that in order to minimize the amount of poverty. If we want to raise more people out of poverty, preserving property rights is fundamental.
I wrote an article at the Mises Institute, I think like a year ago. And even Rand Paul shared my article on his Facebook and Instagram. So I was saying there are two kinds of inequalities. You have healthy and unhealthy inequalities. Healthy equality is what we know. Property rights. People manage their resources differently. Therefore, we're gonna have different results, which will create inequality. But it is healthy because it's people bringing their talent. Talent is not uniform. It is universal, but it is not uniform. So whatever skill you have, you apply that to the management of your resource to create your wealth. So the result will be different for everyone. So this is, to me, healthy inequality. It is healthy. And then you have unhealthy inequality, which is what? Rent seeking. Because you have politicians using the wealth of society using society's resources to inflate the wealth without bringing it back to society as a whole. That's unhealthy, and that kind of inequality impoverished countries even more compared to the healthy inequality that I think we have in the United States and Western Europe, where like people take the entrepreneurial route, create a product or service that they believe would benefit society, and based on how they manage their resources and selling their product or service, they make money and change things.
Wow, that was good. That's a good point.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well. Thank you for your insights and being so generous with your time, Germinal. We really appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners would. Now, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, where could they find you?
Well, Instagram is the spot to be. I also have my website, but my website is more like for my papers and articles that I write. But anyone can sign up to my newsletter. But Instagram is definitely where to find me. I'm on Facebook too, but I'm not really I don't really use it.
Okay. How come you're not on Twitter? A guy like you who has opinions and Twitter works, is a place where people exchange ideas, sort of.
But see, the thing is,
it's a cesspool.
I don't like Twitter. I mean, if you look at my posts, I love explaining things. And in Twitter, you cannot really explain. You only use hashtags. I don't like hashtags. I mean, I use hashtags to get, to get account reaching, but that's it. I like it. If you go on my post, you see that whatever thing I post, it's always a lengthy thing I write because I love explaining things. That's my professorial tutorial part of me. I love teaching. I love explaining things. So, and on Twitter, I won't be able to do that. On Instagram, I can. So that's why I'm more on Instagram than anything else.
Oh, okay. Because it would have been fun to have you on Twitter, have you in the Twitterverse.
Yeah, Twitter is Darnell's, method of engagement primarily.
Yeah, I love Twitter, man.
I used to be.
I think I'll try to come back on Twitter at some point, but IG has been. I mean, IG has been good to me. IG has been good to me, and
you've grown a pretty decent audience on there too.
I'm trying, and I hate blocking people, but there's some people that no, I really hate doing that. But just that some people just take things a little too personal. I'm like, yo, you don't even know me, man. First of all, and if for real, if there is. I'm posting the thing on my page. I didn't invite you to come on my page. So why do you have to comment?
Right.
Why do you have to comment? Just read it.
Especially with negativity.
Yeah, just read it and scroll and move on with your day. I never comment on people's page. I do that for a reason. Never.
Yeah.
You write your thing, even if I disagree, I'm not going to bother. Because, okay, you comment. How your comment is going to change suddenly my whole perception of the world.
Well, especially if it's negative or just sort of a off the cuff comment, as opposed to actually engaging, challenging, and presenting something worth to having dialogue over.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when people challenge me, that's fine. But when you trying to go for straw man, that's when I block you. If you coming and challenge my point, sure, no problem. I mean, my platform is pretty democratic for that one. You're free to write a counter argument. But when people start doing straw man, I'm like, all right, dude. First of all, I don't follow you back for a purpose because you don't mean much to me. And on top of that, I didn't invite you to comment and comment your bull crap on my page. And then people always, it's. I really don't get how people feel the need to write their opinions. I'm like, dude, it's not going to change anything. So stop.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's like, as I said, if it's like to make a counter argument to challenge my position, that's fine. This is productive. But just to make strawman arguments because you disagree, no, I don't. I do not tolerate that.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. We try to be strawman free here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you again, and hopefully.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Hopefully we can.
We gotta do this again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Joel, you know where to find me. So whenever, if you have any idea that you think is worth being discussed, just let me know in advance, and I can do my own research if I haven't, touched on that idea yet.
Yeah.
And then and then we can discuss it.
Well, I know
Yeah, for sure.
I know you've got some work you've been doing on COVID and all that stuff. So as that publishes and gets out there and continues, maybe that'll be maybe on the other side of the craziness, we can start dialoguing about the data. It's
Definitely.
It's a little crazy right now, but yes, hopefully we'll have you back. Thank you again.
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?
Madden and Mitchell Media.